One of the best parts about a new year is reminiscing about the year gone by, and that means lists. We've asked the Culture Combine crew to give us their favorite movies of the year and compiled them in this list for you to enjoy. Let us know what you think of our picks in the comments.
The trend of needlessly splitting a book into two movies has been an epidemic worthy of ridicule, but rarely has the method been so necessary and expertly done as with writer and director Denis Villeneuve and co-writer Jon Spaihts have with Dune. The story feels surprisingly fit for it, as the first film showcased the fall of the House Atreides, while Dune Part 2 focuses on Paul Atreides' rise to power on the Spice Planet. Everything that made the first film great is somehow improved with the sequel. The beautiful cinematography feels all the more epic, which lends itself to the more action-oriented film. There is powerful acting from everyone involved, even if Christopher Walken is a bit distracting, especially from Timothée Chalamet, as he transforms the young and naive soldier into a begrudging leader who seemingly knows exactly how bad things are going to get with or without him. At 166 minutes, Dune Part 2 rushes by without ever feeling bogged down by the enormity of its story. There are certain departures from the source material, but they all feel perfectly aligned with the more measured take on the space opera. It all builds on itself wonderfully and culminates in a very satisfying way. With another movie likely on the docket, Dune Part 2 could have easily fallen to the pratfalls associated with a middle film, not being complete without its other parts. But Villeneuve's deft hand has ensured it's able to stand on its own. It's been an undeniable year for horror movies, and Immaculate may be one that gets lost in the shuffle despite its solid efforts. Starring Sydney Sweeney and directed by Michael Mohan, Immaculate is their second collaboration and clearly the better of the two. Centering on Sweeney as an innocent nun who moves to a convent in Italy, where she discovers she is immaculately pregnant with what most everyone around her believes is the Son of God. Sweeney shines in a role giving every bit of nuance to her timid-turned-desperate character. Immaculate is a throwback if there ever was one, hearkening to Italian giallo films and nunsploitation of yesteryear. The film never quite succumbs entirely to the extremes of those genres, but it definitely comes close, with a few religious side characters feeling a little bit more like caricatures at times, and the creeping pace disrupted by a jump scare or three. Immaculate surely wears its influences on its sleeves, but isn't beholden to them. The film's final scene is one of the best in recent horror memory. It's a completely satisfying conclusion, both emotionally and narratively, leaving the audience with a burned-in image that they won't soon forget.
Woman of the Hour is a retelling of a stranger-than-fiction tale about a serial killer who once appeared on an episode of The Dating Game, and Cheryl, a down-on-her-luck actress, played by director Anna Kendrick. Rodney Alcala, the dating game killer, was convicted for murdering 7 women, but may have murdered up to 130. While we know who the killer is right away, the brilliance of Woman of the Hour is that danger comes from all sides.
What's the question?
Pete Holmes as Terry seems like a lovable sheepdog, but constantly makes unwanted advances. The cocky Lothario that is Bachelor 2 obviously sees women purely as objects, and even the well-intentioned men, like audience member Laura's otherwise kind-seeming boyfriend, just dismisses her as crazy when she correctly identifies Alcala as the killer. Also telling, amidst all the actual danger surrounding Cheryl, the part of the movie that feels the most dangerous is when Cheryl bucks the rules of the dating game and starts asking the men pointed questions like, what are girls for? Thus invoking the wrath of the show's host, Ed. Perhaps even scarier, in contrast to just about all the male characters, Rodney, the actual killer, seems refined, funny, even likable, and would likely be the last of the terrible people in this film we'd suspect as having already brutally raped and murdered 2 women at the time he appeared on the show. He's the danger, but at every point in the show, at every single moment, Cheryl's been in danger, simply because she exists in the world as a woman. Woman of the Hour is about the monotony and bald reality of being in constant danger, and that's what makes it truly terrifying, and a must-watch in my book. Pixar stands out as a studio largely based on its ability to craft a unique story that's accessible to everyone yet doesn't shy away from complicated topics, up to and including, with Turning Red, menstruation and puberty. If you've ever had the experience of being a person who menstruates, you know it's complicated. There's a lot of angst that comes from being a tween and having a body that's doing things you don't understand while you're feeling all kinds of feelings you don't know what to do with. On top of that, your little undeveloped brain thinks that because you've reached or are about to reach 13, you're basically an adult, even though everyone, especially your family, is still treating you like a child. Turning Red's main character May is obsessive, anxious, dramatic, cringy, kinda mean, super silly, and basically the quintessential obnoxious tween. And who wasn't obnoxious at that age? Being a tween is a lot when you really think about it. What's beautiful about Turning Red is that it doesn't shield its main character from the weird, ugly, incredibly embarrassing parts of puberty that even adults don't want to talk about. It's about how you can butt heads with your mom at every opportunity, but still desperately need her. About how a community of women cares for and protects each other. And it's a beautiful film as well, in large part due to the stunning backdrop of Toronto, specifically featuring the Chinese-Canadian community there. If you missed it streaming in 22 or in the theaters in 24, correct that in this new year.
While it might not be Movie of the Year, Beetlejuice was a delightful sequel to the iconic 1988 Tim Burton movie. And though Hollywood has long been too awash with sequels, franchises, and reboots, Burton bringing back some of my favorite childhood characters to the big screen didn't feel like a nostalgic money grab, but an homage to the original and introduction or continuation of the story for a younger generation. Many of our characters return, with Michael Keaton returning as Beetlejuice, Winona Ryder, a now widowed Lydia Dietz, and Catherine O'Hara as stepmother Delia. While the Maitlands have since moved on, Lydia and company are joined by daughter Astrid, played by the perfectly cast Jenna Ortega, a local boy love interest, played by Arthur Conti, Beetlejuice's revenge-seeking wife, played by Monica Bellucci, and a dead cop, played by Willem Dafoe, along with a host of monsters and ghosts, both new and old. Keaton fits back into the role of our villain-turned-teammate in this installment like a pair of well-worn shoes, albeit a little older. Ryder and Ortega make a great estranged mother-daughter pair, and you can feel both the tension and underlying love between them. Lydia's boyfriend Rory, played by Justin Theroux, pulls off being a creepy, grifting conman pretty well, maybe a little too well. While our characters are played well and Burton's design of both the Earth and the now sprawling afterlife are gorgeous, the plot does somewhat falter here and there. At times it feels like our characters were thrown into a kitchen sink from 4 different bowls, only loosely interacting at times. While it was good to see some old tropes and fun set pieces return, sometimes they do feel a little thrown together. But despite these stumbles, Beetlejuice was at its core what I hoped it to be, a fun throwback. I might have been scared a little shitless as a child watching the first installment, but growing up watching that again and again, the movie became a lighthearted and fun exploration of life and death, with heaping hunks of bizarre creatures and sets. The second installment felt very similar to the first. It's not an Oscar-worthy film, and at a refreshingly speedier than most movies these days, 1 hour and 32 minutes, not an in-depth exploration of, well, anything, but I never expected it to be. Once again, it was just an enjoyable and fun movie. While the story might have been a little less coherent than the first and a little less dramatic, it was still a great time. Let's face it, superhero movies have been an exhausted franchise for quite a few years now. We've been living in an oversaturated market of capes, masks, powers, puns, and one-liners for entirely too long, and I'm not the first to have wanted off this ride. That oversaturation, though, is one of the things that made Deadpool and Wolverine, the MCU's third installment of the Deadpool series, good. Much like the first 2 installments of the series, it doesn't take itself seriously at all. And despite the red and black suited foul-mouthed mercenary donning mouse ears for this one, the movie doesn't hold back. If anything, Deadpool and Wolverine is even more foul-mouthed and excessively violent than its first 2 editions. Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman have fantastic, reluctant love/embraced hate buddy comedy energy, and the cast of familiar Deadpool cameos and new to this universe ones keep the fun and energy moving. While the story itself is a little slapdash and basic, tying everything into a bow via Loki was well executed. There's probably nothing that can save the superhero genre anytime soon. It's as overdone as the driest holiday turkey one can't even stick a fork in. But Deadpool and Wolverine didn't feel like it was trying to do that. Much like dinner leftovers cobbled together into a delicious brunch the next day, it was just a fun blockbuster filled with the fan service we've come to love and expect from this particular corner of the Marvel Universe, and just as rewatchable as the first 2.
I've always been a fan of Saturday Night Live, and while most of my friends were quoting their favorite Adam Sandler jokes or Will Ferrell sketches, I was more curious about the process. Writing, crafting, scheduling, it all fascinated me. The idea of spinning a million plates at once, that when one wobbles, it threatens to take the entire collection down with it. While Live from New York, the complete uncensored history of SNL book, or shows like 30 Rock did their best to give peeks into the background of the show, I wanted more. Cue Saturday Night. Saturday Night is a retelling of 2 hours before the first ever episode of Saturday Night goes live. This is where we get mostly a full view of the chaos that goes into every single episode. The drama between personalities and production, constant rewrites and test jokes, the ever-looming threat of everything about to go off the rails in a flaming catastrophe. It gave me everything I could want in that view, while also including some of the classic stories you may have heard retold throughout the show's tenure. It's not 100% accurate, of course, but brings the viewer into the chaos while entertaining them thoroughly. I was not prepared for hundreds of beavers or the nostalgia it would pull out of me personally. What is presented in this film is a throwback to the days of Tom and Jerry or the Three Stooges, the classic 1920s, 1930s absurdist black and white slapstick comedy with close to zero dialogue. From beginning to end, every bit of this wild tale of love and revenge hits right in the funny bone. The story begins with our hero Jean getting famous for his apple orchard and distillery, but soon after many drunken evenings, it's all set ablaze by beavers chewing through the wood beams. Now it's up to Jean to become an animal hunter, to rebuild his wealth, and possibly win the love of a local merchant's daughter. Of course, his redemption arc crosses paths with those pesky beavers, and all hell breaks loose in a final battle of wits. It's silly, it's ridiculous, and rarely does it make sense, but man, it makes for a solid evening viewing. Technically, this has been in the festival circuit since 2022, but it didn't get its official release until this year. More people need to see this movie.
Thanks for watching. We are Culture Combine.